Okay guys, thanks for joining. I'm Evil Reg. We're hopefully going to talk about getting started with airbrushing today. So this is sort of aimed at people that have been thinking about starting airbrushing, people that have maybe got an airbrush but are unsure how to go on. And I'm sure if some of you guys have been airbrushing or advanced airbrushers, you might take something home from it as well. So hopefully what I'd like to do just run through a few bits that I want to cover off today. So we'll open up and we'll start talking about the benefits of using an airbrush. I'd like to then move on to types and brands and my preferred options and why I chose them. I'll touch on needle size, talk about air supply and compressors, some essential equipment that I think you really should have if you're going to attempt some airbrushing, and some quality of life equipment. We'll touch on some health and safety equipment that would be sensible if everyone used. Some painting and masking materials, and I'll do a quick demonstration. I've got a Blue Peter moment lined up for later on, where I've prepared some stuff just for a bit of an undercoat, but I need to undercoat with two different colours, so it'll give us the opportunity to do a quick clean down, and then I'll demonstrate a full strip down of the airbrush and clean out as well. So if I'll flick you guys over onto full screen. There we go. Hopefully you should be able to see that better and you don't have to stare at my ugly mug. Okay, benefits of using the airbrush. So I think the airbrush is a great tool. I've been using one now for about 9 years. The benefits of an airbrush over a paintbrush, straight off the bat, everyone's going to say speed. You can throw down undercoats and base colours as quick as you like. Some of the other benefits, you can get some really smooth blends and transitions with an airbrush. Certainly a lot easier than you could with a paintbrush. You can get some the other benefits using an airbrush. You can get some really interesting techniques when you're masking. You can get some nice clean lines using masking tape. You can thin cotton wool and spray through cotton wool and get kind of shrouded, misted looks. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that I've picked up over the years that you can be getting away with an airbrush. What I will say, it is not a direct replacement for a paintbrush, and to those people out there that say airbrushing isn't a skill, I'd say to them, give it a go and then come back and tell me that it's the easy way to paint, because it's not. It's the same as everything. I like, with my models, I like to take a balanced approach. I like to use a bit of brush and a bit of airbrush, as you'll see on some of my projects. So, right, airbrush types and brands. So there's a couple of different types of airbrushes that we use in our hobby. There's single trigger action airbrushes. So they're your just hit the trigger, air on, air off type of airbrushes. They generally have a siphon cup on the bottom of them. They tend to be the cheaper end of the scale. Some of your cheaper starting sets will kick off around about £15, and some of the more advanced sets get into the region of about £100. Single trigger siphon fed airbrushes, they're not ideal for what we're trying to do when we're painting miniatures. They tend to be more useful if you're perhaps a scenery builder and you've got big areas to cover and spray off. The airbrushes that we tend to use a lot more in our hobby are the dual trigger action type of airbrushes. So this is where you would push the trigger down to activate the airflow and then slowly draw the trigger back, and that will pull the needle through the airbrush and allow paint to flow. So it gives us a lot more control, which is precisely what we want when we're working on miniatures of this scale. Again, they come in different sets, so you can have a gravity fed system with the cup on the top, or you can have siphon fed systems with the cup on the bottom or on the side. I tend to go for the gravity fed cup on the top. I find it's more comfortable to hold in the hand, and we're generally not needing litres and litres and litres of paint, so a small cup gives us a sort of a good sight picture of the miniature where we think the paint will land, so it doesn't obscure our vision when we're trying to airbrush. There are other types out there. There's some gun style handheld trigger types, and they're very similar to your single trigger action systems. They're either air on, air off. The only other thing I was going to say about Airbrush brands and types are they're like most tools. You get what you pay for. So you know, I've chosen with the three airbrushes in the picture are the ones I have myself. They're a Badger Patriot. That came in at around about £105. The Renegade Chrome. It's another Badger airbrush. They're an American-US company. They make very high quality products. The Renegade Chrome I actually purchased second hand for about £60, and I've had that airbrush probably 9 years, going on 10 years, and other than a few rubber seals and a new needle, it's not let me down yet. I've then gone one step further, and I bought myself the Hadron Steinbeck Infiniti CR Plus airbrush. This, in my opinion, is the Rolls Royce of airbrushes. It has a price tag to match. It's not a cheap airbrush. It comes in at about £220. But the trigger action is smooth. The paint flow through the airbrush is nice. It comes with an ultra small needle, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, and it has an adjustable trigger stop, so that if you're trying to spray something consistently, you can set that up as well. You can buy some really cheap Chinese style knockoffs. I'm not going to say they're a bad thing, because they're a cheap way for people to get into the hobby and make a start. My sort of general feelings with tools is you do get what you pay for, and you know, getting all the spare parts, if you damage it for some of these Chinese ones, might be quite difficult. But then by the same yardstick, you could look at it and say, well, a Chinese one might come in at like 15-20 quid. It'll get me going, and I can chuck it away if it breaks up. So it really depends on where you want to go with your airbrushes. Needle size. What do we need? So first of all, what does the needle do for us? Well, the needle and the nozzle is the main part of the airbrush. The action of drawing your trigger back withdraws that needle from the nozzle, which allows the paint to flow through the airbrush and out the other end. So if we pull our trigger back a little bit, the needle withdraws a little bit and we only get a very narrow band of paint. If we pull our trigger all the way back, we get a broader, wider flow of paint. So one of the things I always like to say is that needle size relates to how much control we want versus the area that we need to cover. So if we are painting a small detail, say we're trying to get some OSL effects on, say, a miniature's eyeballs, as an example, you'd want the smallest needle you could get your hands on to give you the best chance of getting a small target area. If we were saying gonna throw down an undercoat or a base coat, then you'd want a larger size needle. So some of the needles that we use or I've used on our scale for the Warhammer stuff, they range from about 0.2mm to 0.3mm needles. So the 0.2 tends to be more of an everyday go-to general airbrush for me. So I'll do the majority of my airbrush with my Renegade Chrome, which is set up with a 0.21mm needle. The Patriot I have that set up with a 0.3mm needle, and I use that predominantly for base coats where we're covering the whole miniature, undercoats again where you're covering the whole miniature. The other thing, just as a quick mention on needles, is metallic paints. So those of you that know how your paints work, your metallic paints have little bits of metal in them. So if you were, say, for argument's sake, spraying the full miniature with silver, or parts of your miniature with silver, and you've masked the rest off, I'd recommend using a slightly larger needle, because you've got the little fine metallic metal pigments in that paint. Just gives you a bit more of a forgiving flow through your airbrushes. Some airbrushes will come with a conversion setup. Certainly I was looking on a website the other day and there was some good deals on some airbrushes that came with a 0.2 needle and a 0.4 needle. That sort of thing would be ideal for anybody starting up, because you get an everyday detail sized needle and a good sort of sized basing needle, and you can swap it out and use it in the same brush, so you get used to the weight and the feel of the airbrush. So you know, if you're just looking to get started into airbrushing, then I'd certainly make sure I was looking for something that had a conversion kit and all that, and gave me a bit of a needle choice, rather than doing what I've done and end up with 2 or 3 different sized airbrushes. Air supply and compressors. So what do we want from our air supply? Well, we want a consistent pressure. We want a high enough pressure to allow us an adjustable range of pressures. We also want our airflow to be dry. So I don't want to talk too much about pressures just now. We'll save that for a later topic. Other considerations to be thinking about when we're looking at air supply is we need to consider noise, we need to consider vibration, and for those with tanks on, we need to consider capacity. The capacity refers to the size of tank. Most air compressors that we're using for our hobby indoors tend to come with a 3 litre tank. You can get air compressors that don't have a tank, but if you know anything about air compressors, without a tank, that thing's just going to be chugging away all day long,
It'll be really noisy and you'll never hear yourself think, and it's not a relaxing painting environment which I enjoy painting in, and I don't recommend it for anybody else. So looking at compressors, you know, my recommendation, always get a tank, always. Again, that affects your noise and your vibration. You know, your compressor will run until that air tank is full, and then it'll shut off. So until you use that 3 litres of air up, which will take you a reasonable length of time, working on stuff we are, you have a period of time that's quiet and not running in the background, so you can do what you need to do. There are single stage and dual stage air compressors out there. There is no right and wrong for what we're doing. A single stage air compressor is taking its air with one compression of the pistons, a bit like a car engine, one compression of the piston, and then that air is pushed into your air tank, storage tank. A dual stage compressor is basically exactly what it says. There's 2 stages. It will the piston will compress it, it will force it through 2 sets of nozzles, and then deposit that air in your air tank. The dual stage compressors will provide you with a slightly higher air pressure than what a single stage one, but I can't sense the difference between a single stage or a dual stage in an airbrush, so I don't think it really matters for us. Other sources of air, so you don't actually need an air compressor. You can get aerosol cans of compressed air. They're great, they'll get you going, but as they run low, you will lose air pressure to your airbrush, and we don't get that consistent pressure, which is really what we're looking for. Otherwise, you'll just be constantly changing your mixes and your airflow to match your airflow, when really we should be working the other way around. You can use bottled cylinders like they use in hospitals. You can get them filled in a workshop or a garage. Again, nice and quiet to use this sort of system in your house, although I don't know, I'd be a bit uncomfortable having compressed air cylinders in the house. I guess that's, you know, down to your own personal preference, but it's not something that I'm going to sit and say is a wonderful idea. And again, once that cylinder is running out, you're gonna lose that constant consistency in your air pressure, which is again is what we want. I've seen some crazy out there ideas where people have used bicycle inner tubes and connected them up to the airbrushes. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff that you can do, but you know, we're looking for consistency and we're looking for a nice dry air supply. So get right tool for the right job is what I would say on that score. So essential equipment. So definitely going to need some kitchen roll. Cleanliness is next to godliness when it comes to airbrushing. 90% of the problems that you will experience with an airbrush will be because it's either blocked or it's dirty or your needle's sticking. So a bit of kitchen roll gives you plenty of scope for cleaning. There's some cleaning tools. Put a little picture in there, just a few little brushes. They're quite handy. They start from about £4 and can go. You can get some fancy stuff as expensive as £20 or more. These are the ones I've got. £4 off a website. Do the job for me. Cleaning fluids and thinning medium. Again, I put a little picture in there of the ones I use. You can get your 200ml cleaner for about £8, and your thinners are about between £8 and £10. Cleaning fluid, what I tend to do with that, I found a website that would supply me with a litre. I then fill the bottle that you see there in the picture half full, and then I dilute that with water, because you always want to be cleaning your airbrush, and you can afford to dilute it with a bit of water, and I'd sooner do that and clean my airbrush more often, than clean it less and have a stronger fluid, if that makes sense. Thinning medium, try and stick to the thinners that match the painting brand that you're blowing through the airbrush. It's not critical, but you know, for best results, always stick to what you know. A pressure regulator and a water trap. These are really handy. Again, we talked about having a dry air supply. You don't want that water, condensation water, coming down your airline and affecting your paint, because if it goes through your airbrush, it'll mix with the paint that you've painstakingly already mixed up, and you'll just end up with spidering, and it'll be splattering all over the place, and it just won't look good. And the ability to adjust your pressure is quite handy. I can just quickly say, yeah, my airbrush is set just under 30 psi. I tend not to adjust it that much unless I'm experiencing some problems. Again, I don't want to delve too much into that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more advanced for today's content. They come in about 15 quid. You can pick these up for, and I certainly would recommend making sure you had one. Some of the newer air compressors will come with them already on, so it's maybe worth having a look at those as well. Hoses to connect your airbrush to the supply. You can get these braided hoses for about £6 or £7. They're fairly straightforward and fairly simple. I would also say Badger, they're a favourite airbrush of mine. They also have a product called Needle Juice, which is a lubricating oil designed for airbrushes. I've put this on my essential list because, like I mentioned earlier, cleaning your airbrush regularly is really important, and once you've cleaned that airbrush a few times, it's going to lose its lubrication. If you want to keep that smooth trigger action, lubricating the needle after a thorough clean down is a must. The last essential piece, a kit, which I actually haven't put on the list, just looking at it, is this picture of the cleaning pot here. So these cleaning pots are designed to capture any washings or any unused paint. I certainly wouldn't do any airbrushing without one, and I don't recommend anybody else do either. So there are some quality of life equipment that we can get. So the first on the list is a sonic cleaner. Here's a little picture on the left hand side of one I use. I just drop a bit of the Airbrush Cleaner in there and drop my tools in there, maybe after a heavy session painting or every couple of sessions. I would do that, give it a sonic bath. It really helps get some of the ingrained muck out. Plus there's the added bonus, you can do the wife's jewellery and keep that clean as well, so she don't mind you spending some money on that. You can generally pick them up on eBay for anywhere between 20 and 30 quid quite comfortably. Quick release couplings. So you've seen I've got 3 different airbrushes. So these come in a male and a female setting. They're just you draw back the end of the female one, and it just clips in and releases. If you're like me and you've got multiple airbrushes, without a doubt, these are some fantastic time savers. Desk clamp and airbrush stand. So the stand will set you back between 10 and 15 quid. And again, if you're like me, with a couple of airbrushes, it's nice to keep them tidy and out of the way. The one in the picture on the right hand side of the page, again, that's the one I have. It's really handy if you're airbrushing something, you've got your cup full of paint and you need to leave the room, whether you want to go to the loo or you want to slurp a tea or your beer or whatever you're drinking. You need to put your airbrush down. The yellow bit at the top allows you to put the airbrush down with the hose still attached, and if you've got a gravity fed airbrush, your cup's to the top, you're not going to spill any paint. So again, not essential, but a real quality of life piece of kit, and not a lot of money really. Spray booths are another one, maybe more on the health and safety list than quality of life list, but it does exactly what it says on the tin. It keeps all the vapours contained. Some of them have fans and extracts through ducting externally, so again, it's one that sits on both lists. Health and safety equipment. Well, what can I say with it? It's a bit of a boring topic. I don't want to go into it too heavily, but the best thing I can say is make sure you read your product labels and your instruction booklets that come with your airbrushes and the paints. It's recommended to wear a face mask if you're spraying for any length of time. Look for masks with filters for organic vapors and that sort of thing. You can get them from you get half mask respirators from about £15 upwards. In the UK, there's a great health and safety company called Arco, which you might be able to get them cheaper. I know there's a popular airbrush website, Everything Airbrush. It's where I get a lot of my equipment from. They sell them as well. I will put the link in the description at the end. You can get everything you need from them for your airbrushing. Always, if you're doing your spraying, make sure you're in a well vented area, and make use of the spray booth if you've got one. Some paints can be flammable. When we atomise them and blow them through the airbrush, you can get a build up of that. Not so much with the acrylic water-based paints that we use in our hobby. The GW stuff, the Vallejo stuff's relatively harmless. But your oil paints that you're thinning with your white spirits and that sort of thing, if you're starting to do that, then you really need to be considering how flammable they can be. The last thing on health and safety, I promise, just use your common sense. If something's daft, looks daft, don't do it. That's the best advice I can give. Painting and masking materials, you can have great fun with masking. So I've got a little picture at the bottom here that shows a range of stuff I've used in the past. Blue tack's great, it's flexible, you can mould it onto your models, spray round stuff and then peel it off. That's a nice product. Humbrol make a masking fluid. I think Vallejo do one as well, and that's where you paint it on areas and it dries rubbery. You can do your airbrushing and then just sort of rub it off, and it leaves your area unaffected. You can get masking tape and frog tape, varying different widths.
you can get sort of micro masking tape, which is maybe 1 or 2 mil wide, which is great if we're wanting to do chevrons or something on a tank or on shoulder pads or something like that. You can also buy like little masking templates. There's some on the right hand side of that picture there. They're a curved template designed for helping you draw flames on and things on targets. They're actually, I got those to try them out. They're actually a little bit big for the stuff that we're working on, but you can soon recreate that sort of thing a lot smaller. Paints, I'll talk a little bit about paints. So you can see from the picture, I'm a bit of a paint whore. I've a huge range of paints. I just can't seem to help myself when it comes to paints. There are hundreds of different brands out there that people use in our hobby alone, let alone others. Some of the more popular ones you can see in the pictures there. Vallejo, I'm very fond of their paints, especially as they have paints that are designed specifically for the airbrush. And they say you can spray these straight from the dropper bottle, which is another thing I like about Vallejo, incidentally, is the fact that they come in little dropper bottles, which makes using them in an airbrush a lot easier. The airbrush range, you can shoot them through an airbrush directly. However, I always just add a drop or two of thinners just to help with the flow. I tend to use quite a low PSI pressure, so I thin it just a little bit more. But again, it's your environment you're spraying in, the pressure you set at. You know, there's no hard or fast rule in my book that says you put this amount of water and you put this amount of paint in. It's definitely a gut feeling, and one that comes with practice and experience. GW paints, I've blown them through an airbrush. It's a little bit more awkward because they've got the flip lids, but the GW paints, they have a fantastic range of colours, and once you get them thinned, I thin my GW paints with distilled water. Once you get them thinned to the right consistency, then they go through the airbrush fine. Some of them are thicker than others. You know, if you're struggling to get the consistency right with water, you can maybe just increase your air pressure a little bit just to help you. With that, there's loads of other brands out there. I aren't going to sit here and name them all. I think we're all familiar with them, and they're all the same. They will all go through the airbrush. You just need to make sure they're thinned correctly, without going into too much depth on mixing paints and thinning paints. We're generally looking for the consistency of milk when we are airbrushing. So if you can get your paint to look similar to what a glass of milk looks like, you're going to be in the right ballpark for what we're doing. So hopefully I've covered everything. Thanks for listening. That's really get through all that sort of stuff. I know it can be a bit dry sometimes. What I hope to do now is just have a quick demo. If you just bear with me a second while I move this other webcam a bit closer. We'll blow a bit of undercoat through an airbrush and see how we go. Let's see. There we go. So hopefully, if I've done this right with a few different angles to look at. So
unlike most people, I've actually got my air compressor in my garage outside, and I run an air line up the house through the wall and into my hobby room, so that I can paint to my airbrush to my heart's content, and not worry about the noise. So this is quick release couplings that I was talking about earlier. This is the Badger 105 Patriot, because I'm going to be undercoating. So you just draw back the quick release coupling there, and that just clips in there, and we've got our airbrush all ready to go. I'm going to be using, here's some stuff I'd prepared earlier, my Blue Peter moment. So when I'm airbrushing stuff, I tend to sort of build sub-assemblies for painting. So I'm using a Vallejo Polyurethane Primer, and this is a light grey, because hopefully this guy's going to be an Imperial Fist. So I've just literally poured that directly into the cup, about halfway up, and then I'm going to use just a drop or two of these thinners, just to thin that just a little bit, because I don't want it too thick. And I've got an old cheap and nasty 50p brush that I'm just giving that a good mix in there. I'll wash that out, and then we're ready to go. So I've prepped. You say I'm not wearing gloves. Some people do, some people don't. Personal choice. I've mounted everything on cocktail sticks or bits of bent paper clip, and I'm just gonna start. So the air, I'm pushing the button down and the air's on, and then I'm just drawing it back in chunks, and you'll probably hear rather than see that I'm kind of pulsing the trigger. So I'm probably what, 5 to 8 centimeters away from what I'm spraying. I'm not worrying too much if I'm getting a real thick coat, because I'll just go over and over a few times. But you can see straight away we're starting to get this nice sort of grey, smooth, flat finish. And that's, of course I would pick the biggest chunk to spray to show you, but so this guy, I picked this up from GW yesterday, I've got to say it was a pain in the backside to stick together, was this thing. So it is a Primaris Invicta tactical warsuit. I looked at the box art and I thought, well, this thing looks cool, but I've got to say there's quite a lot of unnecessarily building on this kit. And what I mean by that is everything comes in really small components and stuck together. And they could have done it in, I think they could have done it in probably in some less bits. But I'm not complaining. I think it still looks pretty cool when it's done. So I have painted some Imperial Fists before, so I've kind of got a recipe for the yellow that I'm already thinking about. I'm going to use some Vallejo's golden yellow, and because yellow tends to be quite a translucent colour, I'll then pick out, I'll get a base coat of yellow on it, and then I'll pick out, you know, where I think it's going to be most exposed, and paint it white, and then go back over with the yellow, so kind of create a yellow highlight. But that's again for another day. So I've just nicely gone over this guy now. Got a nice even coat. You can see I've now emptied me brush. What I like to do on big pieces like this that I aren't going to stand up, I'm just going to blur just air at it rather than any paint now, just to try and help dry it up a little bit before I sit it back down on the desk. That way it's not going to stick to the paper. So I've a bunch more bits to undercoat with this, but I thought I'm undercoating this in 2 stages. So that's me the undercoat for the yellows, and there's some black parts that I want to undercoat as well. So I thought it was a good opportunity to show you a change of colour clean down. So we've got my airbrush here. You can see I've just emptied it out. So I'm going to take now some of my Airbrush Cleaner. This one's Media Airbrush Cleaner. It's the brand I'm using, and I just put that in my cup, and then I'm using the same brush, cheap brush that I use for mixing. I'm just going to quickly rub around the outside of my cup and push that down into the bottom there. Take it out, and then we go over to our cleaning pot, which again I think is essential, is one of these. You should be able to see it if I move that. It's over here, so you just stick your airbrush in there and blow your washings into your little cup there. So and you can see by doing that, you know, we're reasonably clean. So that's what I call a quick colour change clean. So I'm blowing out any excess colour of the old colour, so I'm nice and clean, ready for the new. So as I mentioned, I'm now going to use the black version of the same primer, the Polyurethane Primer. I'm just going to pop a little bit of that in the cup. Again, I don't expect you guys to sit here and watch me undercoat my entire model, so I'll just do a little bit of this, and then I'll show you an airbrush strip down. There we are. So again, I've put a couple of drops of thinners in there just to thin it out a bit, gives us a better flow. Quick mix. I know it's a cheap brush, but I still believe in keeping it clean. So again, you know, some people sometimes check the flow, especially after a clean down. It just gets any excess cleaner out of the brush, and make sure you actually got the colour coming out the airbrush that you want to paint. So I'm just going to move this thing that I sprayed grey out the way a minute, so I don't want to get it black. So this is the front cockpit area. This is going to be predominantly silver, so I'm just going to give it a quick black undercoat, because we all know metallics work best with a black undercoat. So when you're airbrushing, your undercoat is probably a lot more important than when you're doing it with a brush, and that's purely because your airbrush will always put down a thinner coat of paint than what you can with a paintbrush. So, and certainly you'll then see what I mean about certain colours being more translucent and see through. But that in itself affords us some really useful, really interesting, useful techniques. You know, a really popular one for vehicles is pre-shading, where you can undercoat a model white and then spray a black or a brown into where you want the shadows or you want your main colour to be, and then spray your colour over the top of it, and the darker background will then present a darker shade on the top. And again, it's something that I'd like to demonstrate in a future episode or a future session. So I do have some vehicles for this Ultramarines Imperial Fists army I'm working on, so when I get to that, I'll get it live and we can work through it together. So I'm just I've got my pieces all prepped, stuck to cocktail sticks or bits of wire, and that's purely like bits like this, so I can just stick them into a ball of blue tack there just so they can dry. Got a base for it that I made here. Just make sure I knock all the excess off. It's probably not finished drying, so I'll give this a quick undercoat, and that should use the rest up in this cup, and I'll show us how I do a full strip down then. So you can see again with this 3.0 needle, you can actually have, oh, I'm running out of paint now. You can actually have quite a wide band of paint. So, but I'm just conscious of time, so I'll just move that to one side. And for argument's sake, we've emptied our airbrush. We've finished for the day. We're going to do a full strip down and clean down of our airbrush. So again, this is our quick release coupling. I'm just going to disconnect it for now. Put that down to one side. So this airbrush, we're ready for cleaning. Most of the cup's empty anyway. If you weren't, you could put a little bit of cleaner in there and just blow it into the cup. But I ain't going to do it right now because we haven't really been airbrushing that much. So right, airbrush strip down. So you know, every hobbyist needs to get intimate with their airbrush at some point. This is how you're going to clean it, how you're going to make sure everything's working as it should. This one's quite simple. You screw the back off it. This nut here slackens the grip on the needle, and you can then draw the needle out of the airbrush. Okay, so these, one word of caution, you get once you get these out, the tips can be are really delicate, and once you damage or bend those, then the needle's jacked. It will affect your spray pattern. You get all sorts of weird and wonderful things happening. So if you ever taking your needle out, just go careful. Is the best I can say. Once your needle's out, you can pull. Your trigger will just come off nice and easy. We can see there's a hole in the trigger that allows our needle to pass through it, so you need to remember that when we're putting it back together. You can then take this little plunger section out here. So this section here houses a spring. This is what gives us our tension on the trigger, and most airbrushes are of a similar makeup. So there's a spring in this section here, and you can see it's sprung loaded. But there's also this nut here. So this is like a nut and a gland, and it moves down inside this airbrush here, and you can actually adjust the tension on the trigger. So if you pull in the trigger and you think it's a bit slack, you can come to this component here and just tighten that right up, and it tensions the spring inside this section here, and it allows you to tension up the spring. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this section out here, this plunger in the middle, and then I'm going to unscrew that nut there, and spring. See our little spring comes out there. So we're starting to get our components. And I've just realised, guys, I'm really sorry, I've been putting those components out of shot. So hopefully you can see. So that's our nut, that's our trigger, the spring, the tensioning gland, the housing, and the plunger. We then have this clasp here that goes against our trigger, and again you can see it's got a hollow in the middle for our needle. We then turn the brush round and we'll go to the front. You've got the outer nozzle here. You've then got an internal nozzle, like an internal nozzle cap, and this is the one that actually holds the brass nozzle in place at the end. So this will come off, and if you remember earlier I mentioned you could get nozzle and needle kits. So your needles will be different and your nozzles will be different. Okay, so if you were swapping out from a larger needle to a smaller needle, you'd want to make sure you swap out the nozzle and the needle. They come as a pair. That's the point I'm trying to make. You could then, if you wanted to, strip it down further. You can see I've actually got a quick release coupling on here, which goes to a 1/8 BSP, like a adjustable size nozzle gland or whatever. Reducer is the word I'm looking for. I'll get there in the end. So this airbrush is actually supplied with a very small thread. I've then got this reducer which goes on there, which allows me to fit the quick release coupling. You might need one of those 1/8 BSP adapters to fit some of the threaded hoses as well. It just depends on the setup that it comes with. So again, all I'm going to do is put my finger over the end, give me cup a quick clean out, and this is where the kitchen roll comes in handy. Just give me cup a quick wipe, and in there you can also get your cleaning tools out, and you can just push those in, give them a bit of a clean out. Helps if you get the right size. So these are quite pipe cleaners basically. Normally if I've got it stripped down to this stage, I would normally throw it in the sonic cleaner, if you've got one, but for those that haven't, you just give it a nice clean that out, the other place that'll get quite dirty, I'll just get a clean bit of kitchen towel, is the needle. So the needle, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but around near where the trigger is tends to get a little mucky, and then again in this nozzle area. And what I do to clean the needle, I just take a piece of ordinary kitchen towel, get my airbrush cleaner, put a little bit of that on there, and then I'll just get this needle and I'll just draw that through, twisting it as I go. You maybe can't see me twisting it on the camera, but I'll sort of twist it with my finger and thumb at the end and just draw it through the paper. And you can see on the paper, look, we're getting our bits of black primer off there. So I'm relatively happy that this is clean. What I would then, normally I would, like say, I'd have been airbrushing for a lot longer, it'd be a little bit dirtier than this, but I shall just pop it back together, and so your nozzle goes back on. It's just the reverse of when we took it apart. Your nozzle goes back on there. Tighten that up. Now I always I only ever hand tight things. I don't give them a real good twist, because you want to be able to get them undone nice and easy. Your airbrush will soon tell you if your nozzle's blocked, or if a part component's not tight enough, because it'll just blow bubbles out of it. So you can do that. If I just pop that back together, so that put the nozzle end back together, make sure our spring goes back inside there, otherwise we'll have no tension on our trigger and it'll just be flaccid. Tighten that up there. You can see that this component here is shaped, and that the hole in which it goes into is shaped, so that slots in there. We have to make sure that that's facing the right way, and you can see that that's moves in and out, and you can feel the tension on the spring in there. So then what I like to do is just seat that back in there, but I don't screw it all the way in, because we've still got to get our trigger section in. You can see there's like a T-piece cut in the top here, and that helps us put that back in, and then I just clip it to one side so that I can push up and twist this final piece in, and it's got something to push against. So once I'm happy that that's home and it's at the end, there we are, where it is now, then we get our trigger section, and making sure that the hole is in line. Well, you'll actually find that it will only go one way when it goes in. So you can see I'm just making sure that that's sat on the plunger in the airbrush, and it moves up and down, and then what I'll do is I'll just release the switch there, and you can see it pushes, that's sprung loaded, and it's putting pressure back on the switch trigger. It's at this point that I reinsert the needle. What you can do is, if you've got some of that needle juice to hand when you're doing this, just dribble a little down the length of the needle, and then if you hold your airbrush so the nozzle faces down, probably better showing you in front of this camera, and insert your needle that way. This is only when you've got oil on it. Your oil will sort of gather, and you can sort of twist the needle into position, and it will lubricate the shaft of the airbrush as you insert the needle. So just like I said earlier, just go nice and steady. Spot the deliberate mistake. I left my locking nut off. There we go. So I managed to embarrass myself last week, and I've just done it again. So here we are. I'm going to put that back in nice and gently. You can see it's come out the end. So tighten all that up, put that back on, and the last step I do before putting the airbrush away after a painting session is I'll just put some cleaner in it and blow some cleaner back through it and into that cup, and that serves two purposes. It allows me to check to make sure that there's no bubbles coming out of the rubber joints or up through the trigger, and it just shows me that it's been assembled correctly. And the second purpose is if there was a little bit of paint left in there, and for argument's sake we hadn't lubricated it with the oil this time, if it was just to sit there for a day or two and then you come back to use it again, it's just going to be stuck. Is that trigger, so you'll have to strip it down and repeat the clean before you start airbrushing again. So that's the two clean down procedures I have for it. That's all I really wanted to cover in this session. There is a lot more to airbrushing than what I've shown today. Today was really more how to care for your equipment, getting started, the sort of kit that you're going to need to get into it. I plan some more sessions going forward. I'd like to look at paint thinning and mixing. That should be quite a quick session. I'd like to look at pre-shading and some different airbrush techniques that I'd run through in a similar sort of format as what we've done today. So that's pretty much it for me. If you guys have got any questions, anything you want to ask, please feel free to do so. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. Thank you for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube and you've enjoyed the content, please subscribe, leave a like, a comment, whatever you want to do. It helps me make these sessions more relevant and more accurate and more the sort of thing that you guys want rather than what I want to do. So thank you very much.